All right, we're recording.
All right, can you hear me now?
A little. Not too well though.
Okay.
Now I
How
can
about now?
now I can hear you much better.
All right, cool. All right. So how was your day? You good?
Bitter cold, freezing
Okay.
cold. I'd really like to give out a thanks and a shout to Diana De Jesus for, helping and she helped, support a fellow Yanger here and Trin Vo, who became a new patron on my Patreon because of what we're doing with
Okay, that's
with
good.
going to bat for Andrew Yang and dispelling a lot of the uh, the dishonesty that's been the dishonest accusations that have been aimed unfairly um, at Andrew Yang and at the Yang Gang and everybody else. So
Yeah, it's been a real stressful few days, with the whole polling incident, but we're all happy that he made it to the debate, so that's good. That's a good thing.
yeah, and I put a link on my Facebook page for where he was, being interviewed by the political reporters from the Des Moines, Iowa Register, and
Okay.
I wish to God these people that hosted the political debates, I wish they would have asked questions that were as intelligent as what those political reporters were asking.
Well, the good thing right now is that the next debate I think is going to be hosted by PBS, although, I've heard some pros and some cons to it, but the definite pro is the fact that it's only going to be 7 people on the stage. So they've thinned out the herd, so to speak. And, hopefully he'll have more talk time and more serious questions will be directed at him.
Well, I'll tell you, I was really impressed because he was very. This is a guy who talks very intelligent. He's not he is not this snake oil salesman that he's been unfairly painted as. This is a guy who put in a lot of thought and thinks on the turn of a dime about solutions, and he doesn't do this lightly. I mean, and also when he talks about why he supports his solution, he's not bombastic about it. Like he's not. He's somebody that I could see. You know, Congress not obstructing because he knows how to talk with people.
Well, he's definitely very convincing, and if more people understood where his head is at when he's thinking of these policies, then I think more people would be on board. And I think that it's all in the way that we pitch it to the people who haven't done their research. And, like today on Twitter, I saw a post from someone who tweeted that they had a problem. Oh, wait, yeah. They had a problem that rich people also get $1,000 a month. But what they don't realize is that rich people are going to be paying a good bulk of it
They also
based on their transactions, based on their spending, because it directly targets luxury items
well, not
as
only
far as
that, but
what's being taxed.
they also don't understand, and they're also not looking at the fact that just because somebody that's better off is getting, some money, okay? Maybe that rich person, yeah, they don't need it per se, or maybe that upper middle class person with the $100,000 a year job doesn't quote need it per se. But the thing is that the poorest of the poor who have nothing damn well do need it And the only way it's not going to be begrudged to those who do is if it is universal, because programs
Yeah,
that are
there's no stigma
universal,
attached to it. There's no you get it and I don't. It's not the usual rich to poor transfer.
right?
And the way that I understand it is that it's basically like a rebate that they're actually getting, but they're not getting the full amount of their rebate. So like I used an example earlier today, and I said, if a wealthy person was to purchase an item that costs $60,000, like that's what it's worth, that person would most likely have to pay $6,000 more. So that would be $66,000 that they're paying into whatever purchase they're buying, whether it's a fur coat or a designer handbag. It's a $60,000 purchase that they're going to pay $66,000 for.
Right.
And out of that $6,000 that goes into the UBI, they're only going to get $1,000 back. So basically, they're getting $1,000 rebate on a purchase that they actually supplied at least a handful of people with a UBI for the next month who are not well off. So if you think about it, a lot of people talk about the VAT, that they say it's regressive, but it's really only regressive to the wealthy person who's paying more into it and getting less out of it than we pay less into it and get more out of it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Well, the other thing is too, is it's the way I think a lot of the advocates for UBI are presenting it when they, and this is the kind of thing of why it's met with so much resistance from the left, is when you have people that have been on the UBI side for quite some time, and they're presenting it as, what could you do with an extra $1,000 a month, or when they use certain words. And I was following another guy on Twitter. I think his name is John Robichaux or James Robichaux. Anyway, he made a and I was impressed because I understand how language matters, and I did this whole thing with taking on the Associated Press over their treatment of trafficking victims. And he made the case to Yang supporters, saying, look, how you word stuff really does matter.
yeah,
And I read through, he put down like this 60 bullet points in a Twitter feed. I'm surprised he had the patience to do all this on Twitter. But he did, and he went through detail to explain that, look, the words you choose matters, because they were like struggling with, how do we present this to people. And
yeah,
he says, well, don't present it as extra income, because the poorest of the poor, it's not extra income for them. They have none. So when it's presented as extra, it implies that, oh yeah, society's better off, we're going to get a raise, but the poor don't, or people on social programs don't. And that's, he actually pointed out to a thread that he had to go in and defend Andrew Yang and defend the UBI, or the Freedom Dividend Policy, on a thread where this woman, I guess, who was a social worker, the first thing out of her mouth is, how's it fair when everybody else that's better off gets a raise, but the poor people on welfare benefits don't? And it was like, it was so predictable what this guy was trying to tell, Yang supporters and UBI advocates, that this is why you don't word it that way, because language matters. And that's why I like the way of wording it as, this is a social floor through which
yeah,
no one can fall. That will
yeah,
resonate better with a lot of people who will object that it's, quote, unfair that somebody on food stamps has to choose. Well, I'll tell you what, you know my take on that. As
well,
somebody
the thing is, at the same time, a person who has food stamps
Yeah.
cannot work past a certain threshold. They
I know.
cannot get until, yeah, I know you know that.
I
But,
know. And it's like,
that's
if
the
somebody
basic
said,
reason why.
Jacqueline, you're going to lose your food stamps, you know my reaction is going to be laughing so hard I piss myself right through my damn Depends.
Yeah,
Because it's
it's
like,
just,
I'm going to lose $97 a month in SNAP benefits that I can't use because I no longer have a car. I live in a rural area, and the only way for me to get groceries now is through Instacart, but they don't accept the EBT card. You know, I can't help it. I'm sorry. But,
yeah,
you know,
I guess that would be a tough choice for you, right?
yeah, oh, gee, please twist my arm. And, with an income, I can buy things that food stamps doesn't cover, like Depends aren't cheap. Toilet paper, shampoo, trash bags. You'd be surprised how many formerly middle class people that are now poor who ended up having to go through the rigmarole of trying to get help, from these programs. They didn't realize just how bad life really, how miserable these people really make it for the poor. I mean, until they themselves had to go through trying to get help, that.
Well, you want to know what's interesting too, that a lot of people like to use is, oh, everything is going to go up on price. And I mean, let's be real, the value added tax exempts things like everything you just listed and then some.
Well,
It would
no.
exempt your hygiene
Yep.
products. It would exempt diapers. It would exempt wipies. It would
Clothing,
exempt clothes,
food.
food. Anything that you can find at the grocery store is not going to be value added, But
Right,
like
and
if
basic
you go
clothing.
to Best Buy, then yeah, you're gonna be taxed on that $500 TV. But you're paying $550 total, right? And you're putting $50 of VAT into the UBI. But then next month is a wash because they're gonna send you $1,000 again, and that basically pays for the TV that you purchase, and it pays for the $50 that you put into the VAT, and you get another balance afterwards. So in total, you're getting like probably a net gain of at least $950.
Well,
You know what I
and
mean? Because you get the
yeah,
$50 rebate back that you paid into the value added tax. You're getting that $50 back. So it's $50 plus $950 that they're going to give you. That's $1,000 for the next coming month.
right.
So
It's
it's a
not like you're
wash.
gonna buy a $500 flat screen TV every month. It's
Right.
not like you're going to buy a luxury item every month. And, most people who buy Apple computers, we hang on to our Apple computers for like forever.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean? It's like if you're a person that has an additional income where you're actually working, whether you're doing work from home or you got your own thing going on and you're working at your job or whatever because it's still intact. I mean, if you have additional income, then it makes it easy for a person to maybe want to spend more on nice things, for their kids or whatever. But if you're a person who does not have an additional income, $1,000 a month can take you pretty far when it comes to meeting your basic needs and not having to worry about getting food in your house.
It not only does that, but I'm trying to, while we're talking, I'm trying to figure out how to get this damn thing to screen share. Because what I really would love to do is share with you something that would blow what Stephanie Kelton, and she wasn't the only one who said this. Sam Sater said the same garbage. The poor are going to have to, because of the marginal propensity to consume. That's an economics term that really means that when you're poor, you need every penny just for your basic living needs, whereas the middle class and the rich, they're the ones that have extra money to invest and blah, blah, blah. And Stephanie Kelton was the one who said, well, the middle class and the rich are going to be able to invest in Apple, while the poor are going to have to eat all their apples. Well, I'm looking for how to screen share on here because I wanted to demonstrate by bringing up a paper trading account. What that is that's like a fake trading account where you don't have any real money in it. You have just pretend money to practice your trading skills.
That's like the MetaTrader 5, right?
On
Thinkorswim,
on Ameritrade site, Thinkorswim. And what I wanted to demonstrate, I want to see if there's a way I can do it. Good Lord. It'll let me share a file, but not share a screen, which, boo hiss. See, that's why I like Google Hangouts so much, because I know how to screen share and all that. There's apps on there.
We can get on that next time.
But I wanted to show you exactly what putting away like $50 a month to build up a trading account would do for you. That, you know, when she says, oh, you know, the middle class and the rich can invest in Apple, it's like, well, you know, maybe the poor person can't afford to buy 100 shares of Apple at $270 a share, which is about what it's trading at right now. But you know what? The poor person who sticks away, you know, $25, $50 a month for about a year or two, you know what they can do? They can open up a trading account and trade options on that Apple stock. They can trade what's, you know, puts and calls. That's what options are. You have puts and you have calls. You'd buy a call if you anticipate that the stock is going to go up. You buy a put if you expect it to go down. So you can actually make money playing both sides of the market. Okay.
Even if.
And it's like, you know, because it's a leveraged instrument, this is the great part. Because options are leveraged. That poor person who maybe only has $1,000 or $2,000 in their Ameritrade account that they were able to accumulate after using 90% of their UBI to survive on, they can now buy a call on that Apple stock. And one call or one put, one options contract is equal to 100 shares. It's a leveraged product. Now, when you are able to control 100 shares of that stock, when that, you know, stock moves, when it has, you know, price action and it moves,
yeah,
you know, depending on the direction that you want it to move in, you're talking about making 30-50% easy for something that costed a couple $100. You know, an options contract to leverage that and to turn like $300 or $400 into $900 or $1,200. You know, so when Stephanie Kelton said that about, well, the poor are going to have to eat their apples, but only the middle class and the rich will be able to invest in Apple, I was sitting here snickering and thinking to myself, you know, she may not know this, even though she's an economist. That doesn't mean she knows anything about finance. It doesn't mean she knows about investing or trading. Okay, it's a different animal. But her boss or her colleague, Warren Mosler, the retired billionaire hedge fund manager who's the founder of the Levy Institute, you can damn well bet your bottom dollar that he knows you don't get to become a hedge fund manager without trading puts and calls or futures.
Well, even though it's just the whole thing is that it seems like, you know, they're spreading the message that the government does not trust its citizens to figure out how to make ends meet.
Right. And it's like the way they are acting. I mean, when they say this is for the poor's own good, or when they say nonsense, the other thing that really gets me is when they say things when you know, and there's, you know who I'm talking about. I don't even need to mention his name, but we both know who it is. A certain individual who says the poor don't need cash, they need goods and services. Now, Here's the funny part. You want to laugh some more. I'm going to share something really funny with you. So I hope you're sitting down, and I hope you don't have to pee. So if you have to pee, go now, because I'm about to tell you something that's really going to have you in stitches, okay? This certain individual, and we both know who he is, said, the poor don't need cash. They need the goods and services. And this same individual, when he lost his job in 2008, now had he been an older person, he might still be unemployed to this day. He might have never gotten reemployed. If he had been just a little bit older, or maybe a little less white and a little less male, he might not have ever gotten reabsorbed into the economy, and we know this. But anyway, when he fell on hard times, and this is somebody who had not a low-paying job, he had an upper middle class job, because this guy has like 2 master's degrees, and so he's working in the field of project management, IT project management, and that's his title, that's his role, and he's got certifications and everything. So when he lost his 6-figure-year job, he didn't hold a goods and services drive. He didn't hold this, charity drive requesting goods and services, right? He held a GoFundMe and asked for what?
Cash.
Bingo. So I found it really disgusting for this same individual to then turn around and say, the poor don't need money. They need goods and services. Yeah. It's like, oh, he needed money, but you and I don't. Where does that kind of thinking even come from?
Yeah. Sounds hypocritical.
Yeah, and
see, and this individual was actually upset. He's upset at UBI. Calls it a bunch of things. And he actually just went on a rant recently about how Tulsi was warming up to the idea of a UBI. So he was really chapped and torn up about that.
Aww.
Yeah.
Well, if we get this and we have a President Yang, and I'm really rooting for it and hoping that we get there, if he's so hot and bothered that he really is so principled against it, he can feel free to give his monthly UBI check away to the poor. Oh, wait, but he won't do that because he feels that poor people don't need money. So he can feel free to decline his share. He can decline his dividend and just put it back in the kitty.
Well, the funny thing is that they'll say, oh, UBI by itself, that's, you're giving up everything just for $1,000 a month, but they fail to even mention the tech check.
They fail to also mention that you're not giving up anything.
You know about the tech check, though, right?
Yeah, but they're also lying when they say, and this is what, when I said about Stephanie Kelton lying, it wasn't just in her economics paper that she lied about, the welfare programs that didn't, help anybody in poverty. That was bad enough. The other thing she lied about was when she wasn't the only one. I mean, this individual that we're both talking about, who's an activist, and other guys like Sam Sater, they said the same thing, that, people who are poor and diabetic will have to choose between the UBI that they need to survive if they have no income, and the Medicaid that they also need, to cover their diabetes medicine. And I went and looked on Andrew Yang's site. When I read through all his policies and I was blown away, this was after I found out Stephanie Kelton lied in her paper. So I figured, where there's smoke, there's fire. And if you lie about one thing, what else did you lie about? And it turned out she was lying about the the Medicaid, UBI stacks with Medicaid. UBI stacks with Medicare.
It
Okay?
also stacks with housing.
It also stacks with housing. It also stacks with VA programs. What it does not stack with is welfare cash-like programs, which is
Means
SSI,
tested.
food stamps, and TANF cash assistance. And what people have to go through to get those things, you know, they're not bothered if they have to choose either or. Most of them would say, hey, keep your TANF, keep your SNAP, keep your WIC, keep your SSI and shove it. I'll take the UBI because then I won't have to deal with social workers that are up my ass like an enema. And, because you're not allowed to accumulate more than $2,000 in assets. So it's really demoralizing to be put down and treated like garbage and like a criminal because you're poor. But then in order to comply with the guidelines to receive help, if you can even get it, which with all the attacks on these programs, you can't even get, most people can't even get anything now. But if you can, you have to stay poor.
I think statistically, I read somewhere online that out of 100 families, only 10 for every 100 families gets approved for food stamp assistance and TANF.
Yeah, in fact, it's even a smaller percentage than that.
In some states it is, because
96% of the people that are destitute, that have no income at all, that would otherwise be poor enough for cash assistance under, TANF, don't even get the cash assistance. They get food stamps, but they don't get the cash.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I went and read, the policies and what Andrew Yang was doing, and he said, no, people will not have to give up. He actually says it right there that, his freedom dividend stacks with Medicaid, Medicare, veterans housing and, stuff like that. So it was just cash.
Not just that, but if you think about it, like I've used this example before, a household in South Carolina gets less than $300 a month in SNAP.
Yes.
And they get less than $300 as well in TANF. There are some states out here, like I think in Connecticut, the SNAP limit, I think is like $350 or something, or average $350 in SNAP alone. And then in TANF, it's like $560 a month in TANF.
And most people don't get the maximum either.
It's up to, because it depends on how many children are in the household and everything else. It depends if you have a job or if you don't, if you work part-time or what, it depends on your wage. It depends on a lot. I think the point is that, like, I recall Scott Stanton saying this, that certain areas, like in certain states or certain towns, the amount is systematically less than in other places, and it's part of kind of like that systematic racism.
Well, it is, and it's also sexism too, because when you look at the way the paternalism that he talks about, where that comes from, I touched on it, but I didn't really describe what it was the last time we did this really cool hangout thing, when I mentioned briefly head and master laws. Now, what head and master laws and these were laws that were on the books well into the 1980s. I mean, I was in my early 20s when these laws were repealed. Basically, what head and master's laws were that, if a woman came into money, came into property, whether it was real estate or whether it was wages from her job, and she had to open up a bank account, a male relative, it could be her husband, it could be her father, uncle, or her own son, could literally take ownership control over any property a woman might come into without even having to ask or get her consent first. And the idea behind that is, well, with our delicate little lady brains, we couldn't figure out for ourselves, how to best, use our own property. These laws were on the books until the 1980s when they were, the last of them were repealed. So when AFDC was designed, okay, it was designed with this very paternalistic bent, because of shit like the headmaster laws. So poor women, like while middle class women and rich women were thought of as, not able to be trusted to handle money responsibly. That attitude, that bias was, far exponentially worse by an order of magnitude when you go down the socioeconomic scale down to poor women. So when these welfare programs were designed, there was already this paternalistic bent towards the poor because of, the Calvinist deficit theory view of poverty and poor people. And combine that with the headmaster laws and why we had those laws on the books, because it was conventional wisdom that, women, our delicate lady brains couldn't figure out how to, properly manage money or take care of ourselves. Not that, we didn't ever get a fair share of opportunities and access to wealth. We didn't. But you see where I'm going with this. So when somebody like who says the poor don't need cash, now I'm a little bit older than that who that we're both talking about, who regularly gets his ass in an uproar over the UBI people.
Yeah.
But it just really brings back some horrible memories of, because I know what women suffered, and it's not much better now, but it was even shittier then. I mean, my women of my grandmother's generation literally had to get permission from a male family member to open up a freaking bank account in her own name, to deposit wages from some shitty, quote, woman's job that she worked at. She actually had to get permission from a male, relative to I mean, can you imagine that? Can you imagine that? So with the way the welfare thing was designed, with these with this kind of a mindset, that's where a lot of that paternalism came from. And when people praise these programs, it's like, yes, they did help the poor, but, and this is what I meant before when I said, there was this, horrible price and these programs didn't help in the right way. It was all about control and keeping people having, to do it, to be on the programs.
Yeah. I mean, it's just at the end of the day, the welfare programs, at one point they used to work okay, but
they never really worked okay. They
didn't work okay, but they kept people from starving. They kept kids, from going hungry, and I'm not going to crap on it all together, but I just know that right now, if there's a better option, why not?
There certainly
Why not allow somebody to escape that option that they have right now that doesn't allow them to make any extra income for themselves?
Right. And does it really matter if somebody else that, quote, doesn't need a UBI is also getting it? I don't care. Great. So what? If the people that seem to get the most bent out of shape about this aren't people who are poor. Did you notice this? And it's
Yeah.
not people who are rich either. It's people who are kind of in the middle, but towards the upper end of that middle class, who tend to get their panties in a wad because they feel that the gap should be reduced between the rich and the middle class, while they ignore the chasm between themselves and the extremely poor who have nothing. Go figure. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you know, it's just, I think a person really needs to get honest with themselves and say, you know, what's more important is picking, you know, is punishing the rich more important than implementing a floor that would help the poor? You know, because really, if you really look at it, you know, the reason why there is such a gap is because there is no floor. There's no floor. Andrew Yang's plan, but I see what a lot of the people are getting, you know, upset about is the way it's worded by advocates when they call it extra money, and then right away you're going to get somebody who's going to be upset that a food stamp recipient somewhere is going to have to choose between their $102 a month food stamp benefit and a $1,000 a month cash income with no strings attached that they can use however they want. You know, they are allowed to open up a trading account and trade their way out of poverty and buy Apple calls if they can't afford to buy the Apple stock, and, you know, turn that $1,000 into 10 grand in short order. Oops. I didn't just say stuff like trade and invest and dig your way out of poverty. Did I say that? Bad. Oops. Naughty me. I shouldn't say stuff like that.
Yeah, it's just, it's crazy how the whole system is designed, and it doesn't really help anyone as it should. And now it's even more worse. Now it's even worse because things are way more expensive, and, you know,
the cash,
it's harder to maintain.
The level of cash benefits under TANF has not been increased since 1987. So in other words, when a person, say a poor person, you know, poor single mom on TANF, what she is getting right now in cash assistance is the same dollar amount per month that a single mother would have gotten in 1987. Well, if you look back in 1987 at what utilities cost and apartments rent cost, and you know, hell, back then you could save up 2 paychecks on a minimum wage job and buy a used car and a clunker that would at least get you off the parking lot and not break down a quarter mile down the road. I mean, things were a lot cheaper. But even at its most generous, TANF cash assistance, even when it was under AFDC, never paid more than 50% of the poverty level. So in other words, it never even brought people up to the poverty line. At least Andrew Yang's UBI brings you up to the poverty line. These so-called programs, these social programs that AOC and so many other progressives, you know, applaud as being so wonderful, they don't even lift you up out of extreme poverty, out of deep poverty. You know, they don't.
Well, because even with the federal job guarantee, it's still either or. Because if you choose to take that federal job, you can no longer qualify for any cash transfers that usually the government puts out. And,
Right.
the funny thing is that a lot of these people who are pro federal job guarantee will sit there and say, well, we're going to expand this and we're going to expand that. And it's like, okay, but clearly on that article um, about the federal job guarantee, it clearly states that if you choose to get this federal job, you can no longer qualify for any of the unemployment benefits or any other benefits that they would give people who are unemployed.
You know what else it says too under the federal job guarantee? You can
Mm-hmm.
be you can be fired from one of these guaranteed jobs, and if you're fired, you can lose your health benefits. You can be without income. You will have no safety net. You'll be actually sanctioned, for the time that you have no income, and you'll have to go through counseling or whatever to see what your problem was. Now, when I saw this part, this really should set off alarms right there. I haven't been in the workforce since a very, very, very long time, but I'm not totally unaware of what's going on. I mean, I have neighbors who had been in the workforce, and the workplace bullying has actually gotten to become so problematic that it's actually listed as a health issue in the medical community. When I think of things like, well, how many people have lost their jobs because of workplace bullying, where they were subjected to um, being bullied because they didn't fit in with the clique at the workplace, or they had, an extremely narcissistic, abusive jerk for a boss, and then they end up being, bullied out of their jobs through what's known as constructive discharge, meaning that they were basically forced to quit. And that's called constructive discharge. That's the technical legal term for that. And when you're forced out of your job that way, most of the time you can't collect unemployment. And on top of that, now you can't use that place for a reference. So, now you've basically, to omit that experience from your resume, just so you don't have some spiteful ass, sabotaging you as a reference.
Well, you want to know one of the problems with jobs in general is sometimes there's like a sense of politics going on in the workplace. And what I mean by that is that people have kind of like a good old boys club or something like that, like a clique. People know each other. And a lot of times, like, there'll be an employer who literally knows that there are some violations going on, but they ignore it.
Right. And it's like they're,
And it's difficult as a boss to see, every little thing or know every little thing that goes on, because there's so much abuse in the workplace that doesn't actually get reported.
oh yeah. And
So it's like, how do you as a boss know that something is going on in the workplace that you should already know about? I mean, unless you have other people that are handling the situation who are in place, like say if I have a problem with somebody in my job and I attempt to tell the manager, the store manager, and he does nothing about it. Now I wait a few weeks because I'm being told, yeah, we're going to deal with it. We're going to deal with it. And it never gets dealt with. So then you go, it's like, how do I handle this? Do I go and skip the steps up the ladder and go to the next person higher? Because, if you're going up the ladder, you got to consider, well, what do I do first? What do I do next? If that doesn't work, what do I do next? And there's so many jobs that claim they have open door policies and they really don't.
no, and that's the other thing too, is that there's a whole bag of worms there that has to do with retaliatory actions. Like you
Well, a
file.
person can be just as retaliatory in a federal job
Yeah.
as a
Oh,
person in the private sector.
Abso-fucking-lutely. You know,
Yeah.
and when I see, you know, I mean, you talk about when I see them talk about their job guarantee, the question I would ask is, what are you going to do about workplace bullying? What are you going to do to make sure that people who are neuroatypical, such as people who have learning disabilities like dyslexia, who might have problems, and people with invisible disabilities are targeted for the worst. You know, people, and when I say invisible disabilities, I'm talking learning disabilities. I'm talking things like autism, you know, neuroatypical, um, people who are battling mental illness because of the stigma with that. They are often targeted for workplace bullying. You know, so it's like you can't even let an employer know that you're applying for a job that you have a learning disability if you're dyslexic, because some asshole's gonna find out and they're going to deliberately use that against you and target you for harassment to force you out of your job for no reason other than just because they can, because people really are that shitty. And
Well, you know, it's like for me, I've been in situations in the workplace, you know, where even something as easy as a rumor can get started.
yep.
And usually by the steps, you know, an investigation is supposed to take place, because in reality, you can't really go around accusing people of things, especially serious accusations.
Right.
So it's like when you're being accused, or well, not really you, but when your boss is being accused of um, misconduct, and your name is being brought up in that misconduct as a person who was receiving the negative misconduct, it's kind of awkward when, especially when that misconduct never happened. So, you know, at the end of the day, they had to bring me into like a mediation room and talk about it and take a statement and everything like that. Ask a bunch of personal questions, a bunch of questions, ask if this happened, and it's like all part of the chain of command as far as investigating what really went on. So, I mean, of course, nothing went on. There was no issue. There was no misconduct. But he was being accused of misconduct by another employee who actually lost her job because she got caught sliding parts. So when she lost her job, I guess she had other issues with this manager, and she turned around and tried to throw him under the bus and try to claim misconduct. And then my name was brought up. I mean, it was a mess.
Ugh.
So, I mean, you could imagine how it would feel being a store manager and being accused of misconduct like that, just because an employee decided she wanted to get revenge.
You know, I used to
So,
think that people that had jobs were so lucky because I had been marginalized. I mean, and part of that was because when I escaped my traffickers, and I didn't know it until much later on in life, but I had an underage stigmatizing record connected with being trafficked following me. And I didn't know it because, like most people, I assumed that, you know, at age 18 it was automatically expunged, which, you know, it wasn't. And the other thing that I had is that I had to face potential employers with visibly decayed and broken and missing teeth because I hadn't gotten any dental care since I was 8 years old, and I was poor, so I couldn't get dental care. Plus, I was subjected to a lot of violence while I was being trafficked. You know, Johns that punch you in the face and knock your teeth out, you know, and try to get a job, even a minimum wage job as a cashier where you're facing the public. Women especially are judged extra hard on our looks, and try to get a job when you look like that, you know. So it's like I had visible conditions of poverty that instantaneously marked me as the other,
mm-hmm.
you know. So even though I struggled to overcome so much and went into debt and got, a college degree so I could become a high school math teacher. My degree never opened a single door for me for a job because, I just had way too much going against me. And I used to think everybody else that had normal lives, was so lucky. But over the years, and then after I came to Erie and I met and married, Donnie, my husband, which I was hoping he'd wake up and come down so you could meet him. I want to introduce him to the rest of the Yang Gang too, since he's an old Yanger. I got yanged and then I yanged him. And then the other night when his grandson stopped by, I yanged the fuck out of him. And he had never heard of Andrew Yang. So of course I yanged little Georgie to death. And he's like, oh, wow, I got to check this out. Yeah, I mean, I've been yanging everybody. But anyway, I had gotten a job after being jobless and poor with nothing for years, no access to dental care, my teeth rotten and falling out, having to face people looking like that, not having professional clothes to wear, nor the money to buy any. I finally got offered a job marketing a Medicaid HMO to Medicaid recipients. And because I come from poverty, it wasn't a big deal for me to talk with other people in poverty. Well, the other women that I worked with, they were all from the middle class. They had never been poor. They didn't know how to relate with poor people at all. And they were really nasty. And I only got to work there for 4 days. And even though I hit the ground running and was literally mopping the fucking floor, getting in more enrollees by myself single-handedly than these other 20 other women combined, okay, because I couldn't fit in with their middle class clique. I couldn't afford the right image. I also couldn't afford $5 takeout lunches like they could either. Because it takes a long time to dig your way out of poverty. I mean, when you get a job, you don't get a paycheck right away. You don't have money, to buy the things that you need and stuff. So it takes a while. But after only 4.5 days on that job, I got let go. And because I didn't fit in with their middle class clique, and the background check came and they found the underage prostitution record from being a trafficking victim. And they didn't tell me that was the reason, but I strongly suspect it. In fact, under the right to or the at-will employment laws, the employer didn't even have to give me a reason, and didn't. They just said, well, you're being let go. We don't feel you're a good fit. Later. And this is after I worked hard and surpassed the expectations, for the job, and surpassed the performance of of my middle class coworkers. So that left me, having a real what the fuck moment right there. And when I was fired, I had to hand over the company coat that I was issued. Now remember, I live in Erie, Pennsylvania, where it goes down to 0 and below 0 in the winter. It's not that cold yet, but it's cold. It's getting there. And when I was let go, it was bitter cold. It was in the single digits. And I had to, give back the company issued coat that they gave us, which meant I had to walk to my car, which was parked a football field length away from the building. I was basically escorted in front of everybody else out of the office, as if I was a criminal. And, because I was being fired. And I had to walk in the bitter cold in my car. I was crying. And by the time I got home, I was in tears, because then I had to tell my husband that, our hopes and dreams for, getting on our feet and having a chance, for, a better life were just kiboshed because of a bunch of, excuse my language, snippy bitches. Okay. That weren't very nice. They weren't even nice to the poor that they were supposed to be getting these Medicaid HMO enrollments from. They would, talk bad about the poor people behind their backs and say, why do these people, live like that? And it's like, why do they have their trash pile up on the porch? And it's like, do I really need to explain to you that fucking garbage removal is a fucking luxury when you're poor and you have no money? That when you can't afford to pay your water, sewer, and refuse bill, the freaking county will not come and pick up your fucking trash? Do I really need to explain? This is why, when I talk about, excuse me, when I talk about things like the hidden injuries of class, and it's like, I couldn't say anything because I didn't want to lose my job, but because I couldn't hide the fact that I was poor too, because I didn't have nice clothes and I had dental problems that I couldn't conceal. And they ridiculed me because I brown bagged my lunch. Hell, I felt lucky that I could afford to have food to pack to take a lunch, and they looked down their nose at me because I couldn't afford, take out $5 sandwich, which to me, even if I could have, would have been a waste of money because, I would have much rather, use my money on something else, like save it, to try to make my life better, something towards like a big goal, like getting the roof on the house fixed, for example, Granted, $5 here and there isn't going to do it, but, $5 every day for takeout lunch, yeah, it does. And basically I was targeted and pegged as the other because of that. So I felt really bitter for a long time because it's like, when you're poor and you're marginalized, you're told by privileged people that if you work hard, if you play by the rules, if you get an education and you work hard and you do a good job for your employer, you will be rewarded. Well, that didn't happen for me. I worked hard and I did, more than what it was expected of me, and I got let go. And I didn't even get to have any time in on that job to even have enough time to even collect an unemployment check. Never mind, have something of substance to put on a resume. 4.5 day stint doesn't really count as work history. And when I think of how much, and this incident, by the way, happened back in 2004. And before that happened, I applied for a math teaching job in what's called a distressed school in New York. Under the No Child Left Behind Act, there were a lot of schools that, that if they didn't bring their test scores up or they didn't bring their students' achievements up, they would lose funding. That's right. So I was one of 26,140 candidates that was selected to be interviewed. That's not total applied. That's just the number that was selected. You know how many jobs there were? 1,800 for high school math teacher.
Wow.
And there were over 26,000 candidates that were actually selected for interview. So there's 26,000 that were selected out of the applicant pool for interview for a total of 1,800 jobs teaching in the Bronx, and this was back in 2004. So I knew right then and there something was not right, because except for maybe Caltech, Stanford, MIT, and Princeton, you usually don't get more than 6% of the student body in any given college in the country that's a math major. And there's not that many of us, you know, we're a small number. And to have that many people who were math majors that had, you know, bachelor degrees in math apply for a job teaching in an inner city distress school in the Bronx, that should tell you something right there, you know. And you know, when you try to tell people, I don't think that they're being honest about the job situation. You know, like society's better off. We're like, oh, shut up, you're a whiner, we don't want to hear it. I mean, I wrote all this in my book, Classism for Dimwits, and here's that book. You know, I have like a bunch of papers stuffed in it, but this is the book I wrote.
Yeah, I see it.
You know, and I talked about this stuff over a decade ago, and you know, it's just now finally people are starting to tell the truth. Well, it's about damn time. And you know, Andrew Yang is one of the truth tellers that, you know, hey, the job situation isn't so good. And the thing is, it's been bad for a long time. But people that were winning, the winners in society, didn't want to hear it. Didn't want to hear it. If you were poor, it's because you were stupid and it was all your fault and you just weren't trying hard enough. And if maybe, you know, you just got an education, you'd be worthy and deserving of a job. Well, you know what? How come that didn't work for me and a hell of a lot of other people? You know, now I know why, you know, but for years I felt like, you know, isolated by this. And poverty itself is traumatizing enough. But when you're victim blamed for it, or you're disbelieved when you know, try to tell people, hey, look, 26,000 applicants, you know, or candidates for interview showed up for a total of 1,800 jobs. You know, back in 2004, nobody believed, you know, and people are starting to believe it now, but this was always a problem. And now we're finally at the point where America's ready to have a conversation about it. And it's a conversation that's long overdue. So
well, I mean, even considering the fact that it made it to the debate stage, that was a pretty big deal.
That's a huge deal because, you know, the thing is the jury is having to overcome the negative connotation because, you know, the first pro-Yang people I met actually were the douchey, rich, privileged tech bro types that never suffered poverty, didn't suffer from disabilities and health problems. They were your typical privileged asshole. But they were like 4 people out of an entire base of how many others that unfortunately it was just 4 jerks that I ran into first. And that, you know, and then it's like that, you know, was reinforced by everything that Bernie supporters were circulating around in the Bernie circles about, oh, you know, these people are horrible. They're all libertarians that are horrible assholes that really don't care about the poor and want to hurt the poor. You know, you know, it wasn't a good situation. And even though it's one thing to say, well, you know, we shouldn't judge a candidate by their base, but unfortunately, you know, if a candidate is, you know, represented by, you know, a significant contingency, it's like the Bernie bro stereotype. there's a lot of women who avoid Bernie, won't vote for Bernie. They say, well, you know, we like policies, but we're not going to vote for him because look at who his base is. That's who he panders to. If that's who he panders to, how's he going to treat women if he's president? There's a lot of women that actually feel that way.
Well, there's also, it's a difficult situation because people are going to do and say the things that they're going to say and do on the internet. And because it's so hard to silence people on the internet, especially on social media, sometimes, you know, it's kind of like, for me, you gotta kind of, like me personally, I gotta kind of look at what the candidate is saying more than what their audience is saying.
Well, you know? I learned that the hard way when I found out that, you know, Stephanie Kelton and Sam Sater and all these other,
well,
you know,
yeah, but the thing is that they're directly linked to him, so that's different.
Right.
But when it's like supporters who are everyday people like us, yeah, it's like we, especially in the Yang Gang, like there's so many people who have different ideologies.
Oh yeah,
I mean, from different backgrounds, so it's hard because you're gonna find some of us who don't agree with each other on certain things.
Right, but everybody does agree on the UBI, and that's the thing that, you know, because Americans are like, trying to get Americans to agree on anything is like trying to herd cats. Well, that's kind of like how the Yang Gang is. You know, we're not mostly 4chaners or privileged, able-bodied, young, spoiled, entitled tech pros who are sexist jerks. I mean, there's some of that, but there's a lot more. When I saw the people being attacked by Steve Grumbine's group, who were being attacked on YouTube, those were all more like people like us. It was people like you, me, and Jessica, and Russ and Russ's wife that, you know, were being attacked and, you know, dog piled on. And it's like, whoa, you know, because, you know, to hear, you know, what was going on in the Bernie circles, to hear them, you know, not a single poor person was a supporter of Andrew Yang. So imagine my surprise when I find other poor people just like me who are Yang supporters, and then I see my quote unquote so-called comrades, the people who are supposed to have my back as a poor person, mind you, just lobbing these vicious accusations and stuff at all the Yang supporters. It just, you know what? It made me feel very ashamed to be associated in any way remotely with the candidate that I was supporting before coming over to Andrew Yang, because it's like, you know, that's
the first thing. That's the first thing that might have turned you off to the other camp. But in reality, when you got turned off and you started looking into Andrew Yang's policies and comparing them to the other candidates, it's like, it's a no-brainer.
Like, why the hell isn't this guy getting his own major network TV show? Because, yeah, you know, I'm thinking to myself, oh my God. Well, my first reaction was, it stacks with Medicaid. Stephanie Kelton just slandered him all over Twitter and scared, like, I don't know, 10 million American diabetics out of voting for this guy. This is serious shit, right? And then I'm looking at the rest of his policies and I'm going, wait a minute. And then I went through the YouTube stuff to listen to all of the times that he was talking, not just to his supporters, but to, you know, when he was being interviewed and he was being questioned, and, you know, he had faced some very tough interviewers who were really, you know, hard, who grilled him hard. And I was just so impressed with Andrew Yang at that point. I was like, you know what? A prophet is usually never welcome in their own homeland, you know. But you know, that's kind of what it was like. It's like, damn, you know, this is the one candidate who has their act together and who has not just the intelligence, he knows what he's talking about, but he also has the emotional intelligence too, that he is able to empathize. He's an empath. You know, he's an empath. And that is something that's going to go a long way. I mean, he's not a bombastic, egotistical, uh, you know, schmuck. You know, he's somebody that knows how to have an intelligent conversation and say, hey, look, you know, here's the problem, and here's the all the possible solutions, but this is the optimal solution. We need to get this done, you know, and he has a way of conveying that without starting a major policy food fight. And that's what really impressed the hell out of me. And, you know, the more I listened and the more I read, the more I was, you know, yeah, okay, so if I have to hold hands with a couple of libertarians, so what?
That's what I mean. Like, you know, that you're going to encounter different people with different opinions, different beliefs, and not everybody's going to agree on everything. And
Yeah.
there's going to be some people who are trolls on social media. And I'm sure we've seen those in a lot of places, you know, in group chats and, you know, posts and stuff like that, where you come across a lot of trolls.
Yeah.
And their job is basically to try and incite as much anger in people as they can while mocking them and laughing at them and saying the most vile things that they could say. And sometimes you can't weed out the trolls from the, you know, decent ones, from the decent people. But it's like you can't really hold the candidate accountable for the things that trolls say, or
No.
for the things that certain people with different beliefs say, or how they, you know, communicate with people. But, you know, I like to look mostly on policy, and I like to look mostly on what the candidate is doing, you know, because there's a lot of crazy things going on with, you know, the other candidates and constituents and, you know, stuff like that.
Well,
But
unfortunately, I mean, it's we know that this is how we should approach things, but you know, unfortunately, the old adage proves itself true time and time again, and that is, if you lie down with dogs, you're going to wake up with fleas.
yeah,
And
I
it's
just think
it's
that is, I just
unfortunate.
think,
It's unfortunate, but you know, um, that people, you know, tend to, you know, function that way. And the thing that I think makes Andrew Yang's supporters and Andrew Yang's campaign very unique is that, you know, because we all understand the gravity of the situation and why we need to have the UBI passed, that we're all willing to put aside every other difference we might have to roll up our sleeves and do what needs to be done to actually solve the problems.
right.
You know, and I think that's a plus. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that Andrew Yang really, you know, likes to keep a clean campaign. He runs a tight ship. That's the other thing why I just felt so compelled to defend him, because I felt it was just so unfair that he was being slandered and that voters were being, you know, basically put in panic mode. You know, oh, you know, don't vote for this guy. He's going to make you choose between the UBI you need and, you know, Medicaid for, you know, if you're diabetic. And knowing how serious diabetes is, I mean, you know, people are suffering amputations and blindness because they're having to ration insulin, and they don't have enough income to afford healthy, diabetic friendly food. I mean, it's a serious problem, you know?
Yeah, and
So
that's the thing that kind of got me kind of like in a knee-jerk reaction the other day. Well, actually, yesterday I think it was. I realized that did you hear about the UBI experiment that they did in California?
in Stockton.
You're right. So the mayor from Stockton, who implemented the UBI plan, he actually was endorsing Kamala Harris. But, you know, she dropped out. So then he turns around and endorses Mayor Bloomberg, Mike Bloomberg.
You're gonna be.
And yeah, everybody's like, are you serious? This guy wants to tax the poor people more money than they can even afford. You just completed a UBI pilot, and you would think, I mean, we all understand why he would have voted for Kamala Harris. But, you
But
know, Bloomberg,
yeah, that does not compute, man. There's a disconnect. Oh my hell. I have no words.
yeah, because I mean, we all know
I
that
have
Bloomberg is
no
not going to do no UBI. Come on.
oh no, of course not. But that just, I have no words. I mean, when that mayor, and I know who you're talking about, he was singing praises for it, and the amount that was the experimental amount for his control group was only 500 a month. It wasn't even the full UBI. And you know, he was saying, you know, how it was making a difference in people's lives, you know, and for him to turn around and endorse, yeah,
That took me back.
our
That really
country
did.
is collectively mentally fucked. Excuse my French. You know,
I was like, are you serious right now? Mike Bloomberg, of all people?
yeah, I mean that does not compute.
Not at all. And
No.
especially he's met Andrew Yang. So he's got to have a basic understanding because they've spoken about UBI before, you know? So that just kind of like surprised me.
You know,
You're speechless,
name me
huh?
the fuck up, Scotty. There is no intelligent life form left here except the other YangGangers. Oh my hell. How in the
Yeah.
okay. Okay.
Like I told you, it's been a crazy few days. It's
I
been a
mean,
real crazy
I
few
can
days.
understand women being put off if a candidate's if the majority of a candidate's base is, you know, problematic, you know, because and we, you know, people say, well, you know, identity politics, this and that. But, you know, here's the reality: all politics are identity politics, you know, and you know what a person is or who a person is, you know, does have, you know, very sharp uh, impacts on, you know, material impacts on their life outcomes, and we know this, whether it's, you know, politically popular to say so or not. So I could see a lot of women being put off by the Bernie Bros. I could see women, you know, being, you know, kind of intimidated if they felt that it was all alt-righters and 4chaners or whatever, which, you know, no, they might have come up with the meme, but that's not the entire Yang Gang. It's not even most of the Yang Gang. But
Well,
it's like people.
that's what I mean. It's like people come from all different areas with different ideas, different point of view, and it's like, you
Yeah.
know, you could tell somebody to knock it off, but if they're not gonna do it, they're not. And then that's the other thing that brings me about Andrew Yang and about his tech savvy ideas, is the fact that he also wants to make the internet a safer place.
Yeah, and
More security on the internet than anything, because there's so many things that take place on the internet that really do need policing.
Hey, you're talking to somebody who's very active in the trafficking survivor community. I know that all too well.
Well, and the other thing is too is that, like, just like right now, I mean, you got Facebook. You could report pictures that are distasteful, or pictures or posts that are just really they're racist posts or anything like that. You can choose to report it, but then it usually takes Facebook a while, and then usually you have to have a bunch of people report it to get the post off of the internet. And it's sometimes you get back a message that says, well, this doesn't violate community standards, and it's total crap.
I've seen stuff that was really porny, that was allowed to stand, and yet in a new moms group, there were women that were, I guess, sharing photos of breastfeeding, which is like something natural and normal. And their photos were, one of the women there, her photo was complained about by some drive-by asshole on the internet. And Facebook, censored her photo, but not all these other really, truly offensive things. So,
well, that's what I mean. I mean, it's obviously there needs to be
a double standard.
Security.
It's like,
obviously there needs to be someone who's going to be live to, respond to each and every complaint or report. Yeah. And right now it doesn't seem to be that that's it, because I know of somebody who was being bullied online, and me and a whole group of us were trying to navigate that, try to report posts on Facebook. Like, it was like photos of her deceased child.
That's sick.
On the gurney, battered and bruised, because I manage a page that was for child.
I can't hear you, Naomi. Did you lose audio? I'm having difficulty hearing you. I can see the. Hello. Hear you.
All right.
For some reason, audio had cut out, and I don't know what the deal was with that, but you're back now. I can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So I used to run this basically like anti-child abuse awareness page. And the mother was being bullied by one of the competitor pages because they felt like her child was murdered in foster care because of her negligence. And if it wasn't for her being this way, her child would have still been alive, all this other victim blaming. And the reason why I say victim blaming is because, yeah, she had a few issues going on in her life, and she wasn't 100%. She was just getting over the death of her fiance. So it was a difficult time, and her family, who she trusted to care for her child, wound up killing her child through child abuse, physical abuse and neglect. So this page and their admins and other people who followed that page were over on our page trying to stir up stuff and calling the mother, a drug addict, and a lot of really mean, messed up things. And, it was just really bad. Yeah. It got to the point where we had to block people. We had to ban people. from being able to comment or anything on the pages. We tried putting out reports on Facebook for posts when they were posting photos of the young girl dead. And
That
a lot
shouldn't
of
even
the
been
photos
allowed.
were,
I
a
mean,
lot of our,
I'm surprised that even, was allowed to happen, because that's.
well, that's the thing. And my point is that the internet is just crazy. People can literally say and do whatever they want online,
And the
and
thing
there's
is,
no policing.
and the thing that's really sad is that, now you probably don't know this, but the internet was actually uh, part of the invention of the internet. Credit for that actually belongs to a woman named Radia Perlman. In fact, there's a computer programming language named after her, Perl.
Mm-hmm.
Back when Radia Perlman was conceiving of this idea of what would later become the internet, I don't think anybody ever foresaw that it would be abused. I mean, um, when we first got high-speed internet here, and I live in a poor area where we didn't even have the infrastructure for high-speed internet until 2008. And that's about when I, got a computer. And when I was starting to learn how to use a computer and, tool about on the internet, I thought, wow, this is wonderful. This is like, a global sized encyclopedia where I can look stuff up, because I always love to research things, like weather anomalies and history and all kinds of interesting, curious things. And, like, space activity, space weather, solar flares. I mean, I'm kind of a geek that way. And it just floors me. And having experienced what I suffered and the violence that I suffered when I was trafficked from ages 12 to 17. I mean, I thought I had seen it all, but then I find that, on the internet, that there are people that exist just to be despicably cruel and abusive to other people online, and not just with saying cruel things, but doxing people and swatting them and, all this other shit. And I just thought to myself, man, yeah, it's something that could be such a wonderful thing that we could use for so much good is being taken over by.
And the thing is that I'm not gonna lie, I've dabbled a little bit in doxing people online, but I've only done that to people who actually deserved it. Like people who went and doxed that mother that I just told you about.
Yeah, well,
And they were
that's who I'm
posting
talking
photos of
about.
her child, and
Right.
they were putting out her criminal record or her past out there, mugshot, everything. And then when we found out who was behind those attacks, we found out that it was this older woman who lived I forgot where she was from, but she basically was somebody who was trying to be a writer, and she heard about this story of the mother and her child that was murdered, and she decided that she wanted to write a book about it. So she wanted to shop around to write this book that was based on what happened with the little girl, and just basically to make money and capitalize off of the death of a toddler. And the
And
mom
then to
was more,
abuse the mother that was
yeah.
going through
Well, we
that.
found out who she was because this woman had some type of narcissistic behavior going on where she didn't care. She put out her name.
narcissistic is probably an understatement. You were probably dealing with a full-on sociopath, because that level of cruelty for cruelty's sake.
I mean, as soon as we got a hold of her name and got a hold of who she was and where she was from, I did some research. I looked up her criminal past, looked up her mugshots, and yeah, we found out who she was. And so, yeah, we doxed her. But, you know, it was only because she did that to somebody who was suffering a loss at the time. And I didn't like that type of bully activity. And me, I'm just as capable of doing that to someone as they are to doing it to someone else.
Well,
So
I mean,
I
yeah,
did go in and I exposed her because she needed to be exposed. But you
yeah,
know, I'm not the type of person that's just gonna go out of nowhere, out of my
right.
way
You
to
didn't
go grab
know. I
some
mean,
stranger.
it's different when you're doing it in self-defense, and in a way, you kind of almost have to do that if your friend, you know, if the woman that you were trying to support and help, the woman who is going through the death of her child and the death of her fiance, if she needed to take it to the level of going to the FBI cyber crime unit, she would have basically needed some help
Well,
to
here's the
find
thing.
who the
Here's the
hell
thing.
this was.
And here's
So
the
I
thing.
mean, it's like in your case, you know, no, what you were doing was you were defending somebody who was really being harmed. So that's not what I mean when I say that. I'm talking about like people who did like that woman did to the your friend in that group. You know, people that just
And
get
the thing
their
is that,
kicks out of being disgustingly cruel to other people for no reason other than just because they can, not because they want to perform a public service or, you know,
well, here's the thing. Here's the thing. Is that I've had arguments with people on the internet. You know, who hasn't? I've had arguments, I've had debates with people. Now, if this person is being abusive to me online and we get into a heated thing and I'm like to the point where I have to block this person, I could easily block a person and I'll never have to hear their mouth again. But in her case, it was different because she actually had an entire page that was dedicated to bashing her. An entire
yeah.
page. And this page had maybe like 500 or 600 people following. And those people, a lot of them were in the comment section just bashing her too. So even if she blocked the initial person who was after her, the fact is this person had other followers that in droves, they were leaving her nasty messages on her inbox.
And
They were harassing her.
slandering her all over
Yeah.
spaces where she probably wasn't even able to defend herself because she
Yeah,
wasn't.
and it's like she could block one person, she could block 50 people, but there's going to be another 400 people just waiting and sending her nasty messages. I mean, how do you block an entire page full of people?
You can't. And you know, the thing is, I was a victim of something similar to that, but it was because I was having to have personal fundraisers because having no income, and at the time no health care either. And this was, you know, I mean, I had, you know, some women who were jealous because I was getting donations to, you know, my GoFundMe, and they just didn't like it that a poor woman who had no income and no health insurance at the time. I didn't have Medicaid because we didn't have it yet, under the Medicaid expansion, and I almost died. You know, I have Crohn's disease. This is how I found out I had Crohn's disease. I mean, I almost died. I couldn't go and see a specialist, a gastroenterologist, because I didn't have insurance and they don't accept cash. And I didn't know how much it would cost for me to buy an individual health insurance policy because, you know what? I never had made it up to that kind of a financial level that I was able to afford it. And I never had a middle class job that had health benefits. So, I mean, I had no idea what to ask for, and I was scared. And there was a doctor who was donating a lot of his time, you know, and monitoring, you know, critically ill members of the trafficking survivor community, pro bono, because he knew that, poor women, the poorest, most marginalized women in this country, sure as hell couldn't pay him. But he could, monitor and, discuss, based on symptoms. And if it wasn't for, him having me stick with this, food diary and going through all this stuff through telepresence medicine, I probably would be dead, because I had a torsioned intestine. And I could have died, and I was in horrible pain. I couldn't eat anything except liquid, like clear liquid broth, for 7-8 months. And, I was at death's door, and I tried getting help, and, I had to file 3 times. I had to file an appeal to finally get Medicaid. And that's, what ended up saving my life. And now I'm okay, sort of, except I still have difficulty where, I don't digest vegetables I can't digest vegetables even when they're cooked. The only one that doesn't give me any problem, is broccoli, really. But, I actually had my GoFundMe sabotaged, by these group of women that, very privileged women. And they were slandering me all over the internet, saying that, I was a con artist. I wasn't really, I didn't really need help. I almost fucking died. And yeah, I am that poor. And anybody wants to see how I've been having to live and how my husband's been having to live, they are welcome to come right the fuck to my house and see exactly how we've been having to live, for years. Because I, just couldn't seem to get a break, and it was just horrible. And I was harassed just like your friend was. And I don't know why these women did this. They just had a bug up their ass where they didn't want me as a poor woman to get any money. They didn't care that what they were doing was possibly going to cost me my life. And what they did was they ended up, sabotaging my GoFundMe. And they filed a baseless, somebody, that was one of their followers filed a baseless complaint of fraud to GoFundMe without having to first submit any proof that any fraud had occurred. Next thing I know, my medical fundraiser got kiboshed.
Well, see, that's the thing is, it's...
And I had no way to defend myself, because it's like, this is why it's like, people think poor people enjoy having to beg for money just to keep ourselves alive. They don't understand what it's like to go through something like that, and that this wasn't what I wanted for my life when I was struggling to overcome a learning disability and earn a college degree while homeless and literally eating from fucking garbage cans as a destitute trafficking survivor that didn't even have family to turn to for help to rebuild my life. And in a country that has refused to really provide an adequate safety net. And it wasn't like, gee, I went through all this tremendous effort to earn a degree under, really extremely difficult circumstances, and dealing with, on top of that, a learning, disability to boot, which makes, succeeding academically all that much more difficult. I didn't have, in mind to end up being a beggar. I was hoping to be able to have a chance to, rebuild my life and, and have a good job and have a good life. Because I could have ended up just as poor, not trying a fucking thing at all. Excuse my French, but no, I'm not going to excuse my French. I'm going to just tell it like it is. I'm sorry. And, sorry.
No, it's okay. You're
but,
right.
It's just.
Are you okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just that. Yeah. I mean, to try to get inside the heads of people that would be that disgustingly evil.
Well, that's why they need to beef up the security, the cybersecurity, and there needs to be more measures taken to make sure that things like that get reduced at the very least.
And the thing is
You
that's
know,
sad is that because poor people are automatically, disbelieved whenever we ask for money because we are in our because we are in chronic need. We wouldn't be if we had a UBI.
for sure.
You know, it's like nobody at GoFundMe was interested, in, it was like automatically these vindictive, spiteful, you know, people that were actually, they were criminally malicious. But yet they were privileged, they were automatically believed. Whereas as a poor woman who really needs money, I'm not. And then, people wonder why they don't understand what it takes for a poor person to finally break down and resort to having to beg again and again when this is how you're treated. When you didn't ask to be excluded from the economy, you didn't ask to it's just, and in the case of your friend who was in that support group, lose your fiance and your child, I can't imagine what she must have been going through. I can't even wrap my head around that. And to think that there would be people that would be that evil. Who the fuck needs a horror flick, right? You don't even need to watch Friday the 13th or Friday the 13th or what's the other one, Ouija board or whatever. Hell, the world's full of monsters. We don't need horror movies. Life is a horror movie with all the monsters in society that just go out of their way to, hurt other people for no reason other than just because they can. And the thing that's really sad is that that's who is messing up a really good thing. Like, the internet is a good thing, but you have so many really horrible people that just make it not safe for anybody. And that's really sad, because when we first got the internet here, I thought, oh boy, I can research stuff. Because being in poverty is isolating, and when you're trying to, contact and connect with other people that you otherwise wouldn't have the opportunity to connect with, like people of shared interests, whether it's cooking or sewing or science fiction movies or,
just the good things that the internet is good for, like keeping them in touch with people.
Yeah.
But it's that just goes to show that we need stronger cybersecurity.
Yeah.
We need certain things to be held accountable. Like, we have screenshots now. Why can't I screenshot something and send it to the FBI if I feel like that's where I needed to go, or go to a cop and have criminal charges pressed on someone for harassment? I can't really do that, because the police are just going to say, well, we don't handle those cases. But, basically you'd have to go to court and probably hire a lawyer or put a restraining order of some sort on somebody.
I tried to find out and track down who these women were that sabotaged and killed my GoFundMe and basically got my account banned from GoFundMe. Like, I
Yeah.
can't even have a GoFundMe. And I didn't do a damn thing wrong. That's the real, crime of it. And, I got, as much as I could on my own. And this was before I was even any kind of tech savvy at all. And I'm not that tech savvy, but, we're talking no real tech skills. Like, yeah, I can get online and check email and get on Facebook, that level of tech savvy. And I went down to the cyber crimes division, the FBI here downtown Erie, and whoever set up the slander hit piece that basically was responsible for sabotaging, my GoFundMe, they weren't amateurs. These were people who knew how to use tech, and they victimized me as a poor, disadvantaged woman with no tech skills, no way to defend myself, no way to protect myself. And they almost cost me my life, because if that Medicaid if I wouldn't have finally gotten on my third appeal, finally gotten approved for it because of the Medicaid expansion under the ACA, we wouldn't even be talking right now. I'd be dead. And, I was in a lot of pain. You can ask my husband. In fact, Donnie, honey, say hi to Naomi. She's fellow YangGang.
Hi, Naomi.
Naomi.
Donnie? Hi.
This is my husband. This is the other old fart YangGanger. I got yanged and I yanged him, and we're yanging everybody, aren't we, sweetie poops?
You're yanging everybody. You're a yanger.
I love it. I love it.
I love you, sweetie poops.
Of you too.
Yeah. Now, which hat do you want? Do you want the blue one or the green one when it comes?
Hat?
Yeah, the math hats for it. I told you about that the other day. Did you forget already?
No, you didn't.
Ah.
Or I didn't understand or something.
Oh, I said that we were getting our hats for the Yang 2020, and
Oh.
okay. Yeah, and
Okay.
Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, I don't know if you saw, but I listed on my page a post for a website, and I guess they basically try and link up donors with people who want to support Andrew Yang with merchandise. And they actually have, so you can fill out an application and fill out what merch I guess you want, whether it's a math hat or whatever. And then they line it up with donors who are willing to purchase the merch for you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I just posted that on my page earlier.
Okay, I'm gonna have to go there, because we want to be wearing our math hats so that we can talk about Andrew Yang everywhere. Because my husband, he's not real talkative right now because he's kind of tired.
Yeah.
But you get him on a roar, and he will talk and talk, and he'll be yanging. He'll be helping me yang people. Honey, you got a cough drop on your shirt. Come here. Let me get that off. You got a cough drop stuck on your T-shirt. How did that happen?
Well, it fell out of my mouth and stuck to my shirt.
Yeah, but how did it stick to your shirt on your shoulder? Well, how did that even happen? Okay.
As I was sucking it, evidently it fell out.
Oh. So anyway, now you met Donnie.
Good night.
That's Grandpa Yang, and Mr. and Mrs. Old Fart Yang.
Oh my God.
Anyway, we're yeah.
So I'm gonna let you go because I gotta get up in a few and get the kids up for school.
Right.
So it was nice talking to you again tonight, and we'll do this again another day.
Yeah, we gotta definitely.
Yep. All right. So you have yourself a good night. It was cool talking to you again. Talk to you soon, all right?
Right on.
Until Donnie has said good night.
Okay.
He says good night.
Okay, good night. Bye.